Hey guys, Luke on Sean's channel. Today I'm really excited to show off my Witchcrafter Dogmatica build. This just combines two very powerful archetypes, one being Witchcraft and one being Dogmatica. And the fact that both spellcaster archetypes mean they complement each other very well. So this is a very fun build. It can be a little bit competitive, but not really to full extent. I think it can keep up with today's meta, but definitely a really fun deck. So without beating around the bush, let's just get into it. Okay, typical of all Witchcrafter builds, we only run one copy each of our big Witchcrafter monster, one copy of Hain, one copy of Gomeruru, and one copy of Madame Vir. Madame Vir is probably the best one of the lot, most just because Madame Vir has the effect that she can discard a spell and then quick effect negate all effects of all face-up monster your opponent controls. But she also has a battle trick if there is an attack going on between spellcaster monster and Madame Vir. What you can do is reveal any number of spells with different names from your hand, and that spellcaster gains attack times 1000, which can bring up your spellcaster monsters to a ridiculous amount of attack, which is very, very good. Nice damage step trick, so it can really catch your opponent off guard. Gomeruru is very good. It's become a staple in a lot of spellcaster decks, most just because it's a cool interruption that's repeatable, considering that Gomeruru returns to your hand during each of your opponent's standby phases. What Gomeruru does is that when your opponent activates a card or effect that targets a spellcaster monster you control or targets for an attack, quick effect, you can target one card your opponent controls or one Witchcrafter spell in your graveyard, special summon this card, and either pop that card your opponent controls or add that Witchcrafter spell from your graveyard to your hand, which is really, really good interruption. It can be a really good battle trick as well. So definitely important to run Gomeruru at 1. Hain I find to be very good. Honestly, Hain is my favorite of a lot of them, just because Hain has an effect that a lot of people kind of like overlook. It's just the fact that your opponent cannot target other spellcaster monsters you control with card effects when Hain's face up on the field, which can actually be very, very important depending on the matchup. But Hain also has a quick effect that you can discard one spell card, target one face-up card your opponent controls, and destroy it. Which, you know, if you're playing Witchcrafters, the main gimmick of Witchcrafter spells is that if you didn't use its primary effect the turn, you can use a secondary effect added from the graveyard to your hand, which is a good way to get a lot of hand advantage. So basically, you never want to be short on spells in your hand, and that's what Witchcrafter does very, very well. So one copy each of all of our big Witchcrafter monsters. Again, very typical of Witchcrafters, we run 3 copies of Shemetia. Shemetia is the best of the smaller Witchcrafter monsters, most just because not only is it the biggest one, being 1800 attack on a 4-star monster, but also its graveyard effect comes in most handy compared to the other ones. So for those of you who don't know, with each Witchcrafter monster, the low level ones, i.e. being 4 and lower, it has an effect that during the main phase quick effect, you contribute this card and discard one spell, especially summon one of your one other Witchcrafter monster from your deck. So basically, any of your Witchcrafters are a starter as long as you have a spell to discard to go into your bigger ones, like your Madame Vir or something like that. But what makes Shemetia so good is the fact that when she's in the graveyard, you can banish it to dump another Witchcrafter spell from your deck to the grave. The reason why that's so good is, as I mentioned earlier, with Witchcrafter spell cards, the main gimmick is if you didn't use the first primary effect that turn, you can add the spell back to your hand during the end phase. So having Shemetia being able to banish herself to dump another card is just another way that we can get hand advantage for spells during the end phase, which we can use to the benefit of our bigger Witchcrafter monsters' quick effects. I'm going to quickly round off the other Witchcrafter smaller monsters here, just going to round off Witchcrafters in general. We run 2 copies of Ginny and 1 copy of Bator. I really, really like Bator, however, I only run her at 1 here because her effect can't really benefit us if we're under our own Pot of Extravagance, because Pot of Extravagance means you can't draw cards for the rest of the turn, which Bator's effect is that she can banish herself from the graveyard, draw a card, and then discard one Witchcrafter card among the cards in your hand, which is very important because if you aren't able to do that, you have to banish your entire hand, which, you know, is not very good. It can come in handy just because it's able to thin the deck a little bit, but you won't want to be using in a risky situation. Ginny's effect, of course, besides the main one where you contribute this and discard a spell, especially on a bigger Witchcrafter, Ginny has the effect that you can banish herself along with another Witchcrafter spell in the graveyard in order to duplicate that effect. Let's say, for example, you use Creation to search out a Witchcrafter, i.e. Jenny, Then you normal summon Ginny and then use her effect, send her to the graveyard with a spell. What you can actually do is you can banish Ginny and that creation from the graveyard to get another search, because what it does is it just copies that spell effect onto herself as her own effect. So you're able to use cards that maybe once per turn, twice on that turn. Again, just Witchcrafter spells, but still very, very good for this build. So 2 copies of Ginny and 1 copy of Bator rounds off the Witchcrafters we run in this main deck. Heading towards the Dogmatika side, we run 2 copies of Ecclesia. I tried to keep the Dogmatika stuff to a minimum, just because I still want to keep Witchcrafters in the forefront of this deck. But Dogmatika is really, really powerful. Arguably, Dogmatika engine is more powerful than the Witchcrafter engine. Ecclesia is really, really good because it's a 1500 attack monster, so with Nadira Servant, you're able to dump your Goraria in order to search her out, and then Goraria gets the effect that you can draw since it was sent to the graveyard. But also Ecclesia can be special summoned from your hand if there's a monster from the extra deck on the field, but she can also be normal summoned, which is very handy. And when she is summoned, you can add a Dogmatika card from your deck to your hand, which of course is very, very good. However, when you're using this effect, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck for the rest of the turn. So that's the one drawback of Dogmatika as an engine. However, with the Witchcrafter engine, you kind of just want to get rid of your Witchcrafter stuff at the beginning and then finish it off with the Dogmatika stuff as more of icing on the cake rather than the main engine itself. So 2 copies of Ecclesia. 1 copy of Fleur-de-Lis. Fleur-de-Lis is very, very good. Fleur-de-Lis, you can search it off of Ecclesia. You can also special summon off of Titanclad if it's dumped. It's just a very, very good card overall. Fleur-de-Lis is great because during the main phase, if a monster special summon from the X deck is on the field, you can actually quick effects special summon this card from your hand. And if Fleur-de-Lis is special summoned while he has another Dogmatika monster on the field, you can actually negate the effects of one face-up monster on the field, which can be very, very good. Considering that as a quick effect, it's very good at interrupting your opponent when they're in the middle of their combo. But also, Fleur-de-Lis has a secondary effect that if a Dogmatika monster attacks your opponent, what Fleur-de-Lis does is able to increase the attack of all Dogmatika monsters you currently control by 500. So Fleur-de-Lis is very easy to bring himself up to 3000 and bring the Ecclesia up to 2k, which is very, very good. I run 1 copy of Dogmatika Maximus. Maximus I find very good. He kind of grew on me when I started experimenting with him in Shaddolls. But the reason why I like him is that you can bring him out by banishing 1 extra deck monster from the graveyard in order to special summon him. And also during the main phase, you can send 2 monsters with different names from your extra deck to the graveyard. And we have a lot of monsters in the extra deck that have advantage when you send them to the graveyard, like Goraria is able to draw you a card and Titanclad is able to get you a plus on a Dogmatika monster. So bringing out Maximus I find to be very, very good for this build. Rounding off the monsters now, 3 copies of Ash Blossom. You guys already know Ash Blossom is probably one of the most universal hand traps in the entire game, so it would be foolish to try and be competitive with a deck without running at least 3 copies of Ash Blossoms. As we're going into the spells now, we'll just focus on the Witchcrafter side of things. So 3 copies of Witchcrafter Creation. This is the card I mentioned earlier, which is the Rhoda of the deck. So Creation just simply adds you 1 Witchcrafter monster from your deck to your hand. And of course, just like every other Witchcrafter spell that I'm going to talk about, also has a secondary effect that if you do not use the primary effect while this is in the graveyard during the end phase, you can add it from the graveyard to your hand, which is a good way to keep up hand advantage throughout this game. So 3 copies of Creation, very, very good for the build. I run 2 copies of Witchcrafter Holiday, the monster reborn of the build. Just target 1 Witchcrafter monster in your graveyard and you can special summon it. 1 copy of Witchcrafter Confusion Confession. This is the polymerization of the Witchcrafter archetype. I really wish this card was better, considering that we have a bunch of really great fusion cards that are able to fuse using monsters from the deck and stuff like that. And I think if this card was able to do that, it would really elevate Witchcrafters up to a new height that it's just simply not at right now. But you know, it's basically just a poly with the graveyard advantage that Witchcrafter has, which, you know, we can't complain. We did have a fairly decent fusion monster with Witchcrafter, so I suppose it might be asking too much if we make the fusion spell be really, really broken. So either way, 1 copy of Confusion Confession. I run 1 copy of Unveiling, and I also run 1 copy of Draping. Draping is really, really bad spell and trap removal. However, it's searchable spell and trap removal, so we take what we can get. And Unveiling is actually a very good special summon card. What makes Unveiling very, very good is that One of the main things that this deck can struggle with is if we open our big Witchcrafter monsters that we can't just like summon out like Shemet and stuff like that. I mean, Madame Vera is a level 8 and Hain is a level 7. So if we open them in their hand, we really have no way of kind of getting them on the field unless if we're able to either tribute summon them or special summon them with Unveiling. That's why one copy of Unveiling is very important, just to unbrick yourself with the Witchcrafter, the big Witchcrafters that you have in the hand. Reason why I don't like Draping very much is the fact that you need to target spells your opponent controls up to the number of Witchcrafter monsters you control and then return them to the hand. So it's not even spells / trap destruction, it's returning to the hand. And also the fact that you need to be controlling a bunch of your Witchcrafter specific monsters is just very, very, very poor. It's not really a great bit of removal, but you know, spell and trap removal is mostly something for the side deck. So this is just a nice something that you can main deck if needs be. Especially if you're like just testing the waters and you don't really know what your opponent is playing. So one copy each of Draping and Unveiling. I run the one copy of Buy Street. I don't run Scroll. I don't think Scroll is very, very good for the build, but Buy Street I find to be very, very good. Just its simple protection, Buy Street is that if a Witchcrafter monster will be destroyed the first time, it's just simply not destroyed. So it just makes it harder for your opponent to chip away your Witchcrafter monsters. Especially because Witchcrafters don't build up a great board by themselves. It's just great to kind of have a little bit of extra protection when you're going first and stuff like that. So Buy Street at 1 I think is definitely very, very good for the build. But actually I should also mention about Buy Street, what makes it a little bit different and arguably a little bit better than the other Witchcrafter cards is the fact that since it's a continuous spell, rather than during the end phase if you didn't use its primary effect as your hand, this actually comes to the field, which is actually another benefit of Buy Street. Now, going Dogmatika again for a little bit. 3 copies of Nadir Servant. I love Nadir Servant. I just love Dogmatika in general. Nadir Servant, just send one monster from the X deck to the graveyard, then add one Dogmatika monster or Fallen of Albaz, which we don't run, from the deck or graveyard to your hand, equal to the attack less than or equal to the monster sent. I really like this, most just because you're able to send your Goraria in order to search your Ecclesia, and then Goraria affecting the graveyard gets you to draw a card. But also if you're in a position where you like to search your Fleur-de-Lis, you're able to dump your Titanclad, and then Titanclad gets you advantage during the end phase of that turn if it's still in the graveyard. Just a lot of good things you can do with Nadir Servant. Once you're able to keep up hand advantage with your Dogmatika cards, Nadir Servant is very, very good. 3 copies of it for the build. I actually think that's the main reason why you can afford to run such a small Dogmatika package itself, just because they're all searchable in Nadir Servants. That's why I kind of really emphasize the fact that running this at 3 is very important. Also the fact that it's a spell card is very good for your other bigger Witchcrafters effects too. Just a tech option I kind of think is really funny, so I'd recommend that you run it, but not really a necessity. I run 1 copy with Duality. You can kind of brick with this, that's why I only run it at 1. It's just a fun little tech option, considering that we run a lot of level 8 light spellcaster monsters in the main deck. You're able to Duality into Dragoon, which we run in this build, which is a very, very funny trick that you can pull on your opponent that a lot of them just don't expect. So I think Duality at 1 is very, very good. If I ran it anymore, I'd probably lean heavier into making this like Witchcrafter Dragoon Turbo type deck, which we can probably build in the future and kind of show off how you would go about building it. But this is just a fun little tech option. This isn't an overly competitive deck, like I said, but still it can be very good at stealing games. So 1 copy with Duality I find to be very, very good. Bring out Dragoon, and we all know how much of a pain in the ass Dragoon can be. Speaking of pains in the ass, 3 copies of Secret Village of Spellcasters. So we primarily run spellcaster monsters in this build. So of course we're going to almost always have a spellcaster monster on the field. So why not make it easier for ourselves to shut your opponent off of activating spells. Secret Village Spellcaster simply reads that if only you control a spellcaster monster, your opponent cannot activate spell cards. But also it has a downside: if you control no spellcaster monsters, you cannot activate spells. So you know what, I want to make sure you're in a position that's actually very good and stable when you activate this card. But if not, the reason why we run it at 3 is that it's another spell card that we're able to reveal with Madame Vera or use to destroy with Hain. It's very good to have as many spells in this build as possible. So I find 3 copies of Secret Village to be very, very good. Let's talk about draw power. 3 copies of Prosperity. Prosperity, of course, is a lot easier to get now thanks to the reprint in the 25th anniversary packs. But this deck still needs a lot more draw power. I know Prosperity is very, very good and we don't really care about the extra deck, but just in case we also run 2 copies of Extravagance as well. I can't tell you enough or emphasize enough how important draw power is, so I'll even throw in another copy of Upstart Goblin. These things serve as 2 purposes really. So one being, yes, it's great to have the draw power as much as you can, take as much as you can. Like, you want to get so much hand advantage in order to really max out the power of your Madame Vir, of your Hane, of all of your Witchcrafter monster on the field. But also the fact that these are all spells means that they can actually easily be discarded in order for your Witchcrafter monsters to get the full advantage of their primary effects as well. So it's very important to have spells that are good and can do something, but also just have spells in general that are able to really make your Witchcrafters pop off. That's why I won 3 copies of Prosperity, 2 Extravagance, and 1 Upstart. Very, very good for this build. This deck can kind of go combo, so 1 copy of Call by the Grave is also very good. And you know what? Call by the Grave at this point is just a good disruption in itself, so 1 copy of it. Unfortunately, it's limited, so we can only run 1 copy, but definitely essential for the build. I run 1 copy of Patronus. I feel like there's a Floodgate Witchcrafter build that you can make that would involve dimensional fissure and likes of that, which would make Patronus have a more important role. Reason for that being, Patronus is a very powerful continuous trap that states you can target 1 spellcaster monster that is banished or in the graveyard and shuffle into the deck, and if you do, add 1 Witchcrafter spell from your deck to your hand. This is very, very good at getting hand advantage and recycling your banished Witchcrafter monsters, which can be very, very important when you want to kind of recycle them and get their effects again when you're bringing them out again on the field. So 1 copy of Patronus is very, very good. The secondary effect doesn't matter too much. I just find any deck that's able to sort of recycle their banished cards can be very, very good. So 1 copy of Patronus I find to be very, very important. 1 copy of Dogmatic Punishment. Dogmatic Punishment can be searched because of Ecclesia. Ecclesia can search any Dogmatic card, including this card. And this card is very, very good. It's a nice interruption. You can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls, send 1 monster with an equal or higher attack from the X deck to the graveyard, and if you do, destroy that monster. Which is very, very good. However, until the end phase of the next turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon monsters from the extra deck, which can be a bit of a downside, but Dogmatic Punishment is a really good way to dump extra deck monsters, which can get graveyard advantage off of them too. So 1 copy of Punishment. And finally, rounding off the deck, we run 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence. Impermanence is just a really, really good hand trap, really good trap overall, just a monster effect negate, can't go wrong with it. Okay, going into the extra deck now, we run 2 copies of Witchcrafter Vice Madam. Vice Madam is a very, very good additional bit of support. I still think Witchcrafters need a bit more support in order to really elevate them up to the next level, but this is still great. This fusion requires 1 Witchcrafter monster, 1 Spellcaster monster, essentially your entire deck. And also, she has the effect that when a spell card or effect or a non-fusion spellcaster monster effect is activated, you can quick effect activate 1 of these effects. But you can only use 1 of these effects once per turn. So 1 can be you can destroy 1 card in the field. 1 could be you can special summon 1 level 6 or lower Witchcrafter monster from your hand or deck, or you can add 1 Witchcrafter spell or trap from your graveyard to the hand. All very, very good effects. However, I don't think that she's as great as support that Witchcrafters deserve. That's why I only run her at 2. She's not really too essential to run. Most of the time when you're playing this build, you're only winning with your main deck monsters anyways, but it's still a cool support monster as well. But again, we don't really care too much about the extra deck. That's why I run this at 2 in case we Extravagance to get rid of it. It's good to just have 1 just in case. So 2 copies is more than enough. The reason why I don't run 3 is just because, well, A, I don't think it's as good of a boss monster as it can be, and B, the extra deck is just a little bit tight in order for other monsters in the build. 1 copy of Dragoon, as I said, duality is the only way we're getting into this. However, if you're playing against a Dark Magician deck, we actually, surprise, surprise, run Super Poly in the side deck. So Red Eyes Dark Dragoon, I find running out 1 in this build is very, very good. If you banish it off of Extravagance, unfortunately your duality is offline, but as I said, it's another spell that you're able to discard to the graveyard for your Witchcrafter effects, so we don't mind it too much. Dragoon is just a fun little tech option that I like to run, so 1 copy of it in the build. 2 copies of Titanclad. Titanclad, Still a very good monster. We mostly just use him so we can dump him in order that we can get his graveyard effect. That during the end phase, if this card's in the graveyard that turn, you can either add to your hand or special summon one Dogmatika monster from your deck, or one Fallen Valblast, but again we don't run Fallen Valblast in this build. So Titanclad's a good way that you can search your Fleur-de-Lis, and then if you are in a position where you have another Dogmatika monster on the field, you can special summon Fleur-de-Lis for an interruption during your opponent's turn. So 2 copies of Titanclad. I run 2 copies of Elder Entity Entis. Of course you already know what Entis does. She's like the best Dogmatika punishment target just because Entis is 2500 attack, you can dump her, and then when she's in the graveyard she has another pop on the field. So Entis is very, very good for build. Also the fact that you can dump her with Nadir Servant is also very, very good. So Entis at 2 I think to be very, very good for the build. Again, I keep talking about draw power and the importance of it. Since you dump a bunch of your extra deck stuff, 3 copies of Goraria. When Goraria is sent to the graveyard, you're able to just draw a card, and that is just absolutely brilliant support, so I definitely recommend running a 3. But also the fact that it's a super poly target and we run super poly in the side deck is very, very good, because Goraria simply needs 2 monsters with the same type and attribute but different names, which, you know, is a lot of decks out there would run cards like that. So definitely essential to run this in the build. Gonna speed by this. These guys are simply here because of the super poly in the side deck, but also since we don't care too much about the extra deck, we're able to fill it up with a bunch of stuff we simply don't need. So 2 copies of Mudragon of Swamp and 2 copies of Starving Venom Fusion Dragon I find to be very, very good for the build. Finally, rounding off the extra deck, we run 1 copy of Artemis. Artemis needs 1 level 4 lower spellcaster monster in order to go into her. The main reason we run her is just so we can use our small Witchcrafter monsters effects in the graveyard when you're in a position where we need to do that. So Artemis is very good at getting rid of our Witchcrafters that are on the field just to get their graveyard effects. That's why I run 1 copy of it in this build. Alright, let's finish things off with the side deck. 3 copies of Lancia. Lancia, you know, we banish our own stuff too. That's why we don't run Imperial Iron Wall. I think Lancia is a lot better for that. We don't want all of our spells to be banished, so if your opponent is playing something like Hashtira or they're playing something that really F's up your graveyard, it's important to have something to stop them from doing that, because we really want our spells. So 3 copies of Lancia in the side, very, very important, but again, depends on the matchup. 3 copies of Dark Ruler no more. We could be in a position where we have to go second, and if we're playing against a combo deck, it's important to have Dark Ruler no more in order to kind of like stop your opponent's big boards from completely messing you up. So 3 copies of it in the build I find to be very, very good. Also, the fact that it's an extra spell that you're able to discard for your Witchcrafter monster's effects, I find to be great as well. So 3 copies of Dark Ruler no more. 3 copies of Book of Eclipse. Book of Eclipse, I'm glad is getting the praise that it deserves. I find it to be a really, really good card. It's also good at interrupting your opponent because your opponent can't link with face down position monsters. What Book of Eclipse does is that you can change all face up monster on the field to face down defense position. Then during the end phase of this turn, change as many face down defense position monster your opponent controls as possible to face up defense position. And then your opponent draws cards equal to the number of monsters change face up by this effect. The reason why this is good is the fact that if you're activating during your turn and put a bunch of your opponent's monsters face down, you're able to kind of like remove them. So by the time that this resolves during the end phase, your opponent doesn't get as many draws as they could have had if you're really picking away their board after Book of Eclipse. But also this can be crippling because if your opponent has 1 starter and they're playing a link deck, and then they have that starter on the field and you Book of Eclipse it, they can't link with face down monsters, so Book of Eclipse can be very crippling to them. So 3 copies of it in the side I find to be very, very good. 3 copies of Super Poly. Super Poly is an insane card. I still can't believe that it's been unlimited for so long. I'm so appreciative of it because I really love this card. Super Poly, you already know what it does. It's just discard 1 card, fusion summon a fusion monster using monsters from either field as fusion materials. This is why we have a lot of our Super Poly targets in the extra deck: Goraria, Starving Venom, and Mudragon. So 3 copies of it in the side deck, very, very good. Rounding things off, in hindsight you could probably replace this with Evenly Matched, but I kind of wanted to change around ratios, just kind of make this deck unique in itself. I own 1 copy of Dogmatika Punishment, just because although we main deck one of them, sometimes it can be quite good to have just the extra one if we needed a side in. I find it to be very, very good, so 1 copy of that. And I also own 1 copy of Magician's Left Hand and 1 copy of Magician's Right Hand. These are continuous spells you can have on the field. What left hand does is it negates the effect of your opponent's first trap card or effect that resolves each turn when you control a spellcaster monster and if you destroy it. And then right hand's spell equivalent is negate the effect of your opponent's first spell card or effect that resolves each turn when you control a spellcaster monster. And if you do, destroy it. So that's what I round off the side deck with. Honestly, in hindsight, you can probably change that with evenly matched, but this is Witchcrafters, not my main deck, so I don't want to be putting all my good cards into Witchcrafters specifically. Therefore, this is why I round off the deck with this. So that about does it for the build. Please let me know what you think. I'm pretty happy with the way this deck turned out. Again, it's Witchcrafters, not the most competitive deck in the world, but I still think you'll have a lot of fun playing it like this. If you have any other suggestions, please let me know. If you test out this deck and want to share your experience, please let me know in the comments. Sean and I definitely read a lot of them. Don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel because there's plenty more profiles, tier lists, and other stuff on the way. So be sure to check out all of that, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, goodbye.